This is an interesting adventure. I'm sure it is, and I'm sure you'll find it that way. I certainly hope you do. It's also a fun experience because it is, after all, the one thing that matters to all of us universally, without question. The one thing that matters to all of us is our happiness. And, of course, we'd like to keep our loved ones, our friends and our families happy at the same time and along the way as much as we possibly can. But of course, how can one make another one happy if they're not happy themselves in the first place? This is why, before I started to talk to you about this, about what I'm sharing with you, and I have been sharing with you over the past few talks, I was a student of this discipline myself for a considerably long period of time. In fact, it has been over 6 or 7 years by now that I have been consistently a student of this practice, and so you can be assured that I speak to you with conviction, experience to back it as well. And this is why I speak to you with confidence, because I know, having experienced, having tried out all sorts of other avenues and alternatives and options and choices, there isn't any other that is quite the match for this. And what is this? This is the Buddha's guide to happiness. So we meet again today to take another step together on this journey as we go forwards and onwards. Before we commence then, let us take a moment to pay our veneration to the Supreme Teacher, the Supremely Enlightened, the Perfect One, the Omniscient One, the Magnificent One, and that is the Lord Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. I know many of you will have come with us right from the beginning. So I trust that most of you who are with us here today would have joined us on the first talk of this series. Do you all remember what that was? It was titled, Why Buddhism? And then do you remember the second talk? I admit it might have come across as quite controversial for a lot of you, considering what we may have heard and what you may have learned about Buddhism all this time. And what was that? That Buddhism is not about letting go. Because it is true, is it not, that in most books and in some talks, seminars, lectures, and so on, we have often, I myself have come across the concept that Buddhism is about letting go. And that has, to some extent, also explained to me why a lot of people aren't in favor of Buddhism, particularly those who call themselves Buddhists, after all. People who are Buddhists by birthright, as in something that they inherit from their parents. A lot of Buddhists that I have known in my life, or at least who claim to be Buddhists by birthright, are not really totally in favor of Buddhism, and they're not committed to practicing the Buddhist philosophy. And, you know, I don't blame them. Certainly not after I know what I know today. Because even if it was proposed to me that in the name of Buddhism I have to let go of everything, I can assure you, myself, I wouldn't have jumped up and down over the idea. Because I know how hard I have worked all my life, particularly in my lay life, to acquire a lot of the things that I had acquired before I decided to make a change and take a different path. All the hardship that I had to endure, the long hours of work, study, commitment, dedication, persistence, and fighting all those challenges and battles along the way, trying to win arguments and debates and discussions and getting involved in meetings and all that. So that was all the effort I had to put in to acquire a lot of the things that I had acquired. So then to be told that in the name of Buddhism, you have to let go of all of these things would have sounded quite absurd to me. I would not have been in favor of that idea. Certainly not. So it was certainly a breath of fresh air to me when I realized, actually, that is not what Buddhism is all about. It is not about letting go. So that's when I took a great sigh of relief and I thought, whew, finally, I can at least take a moment to study Buddhist philosophy, because I was worried. Not just I, but my parents. You can imagine, when I first started to listen to these talks, right? And when I started to become a regular to these talks, and when I started to study them and try and apply those principles into my life, the people who lived with me and around me, they began to realize that I had taken up a new interest. And when they learned that it was Buddhism, they were not very impressed. Certainly not at first. Not very impressed, again, I completely understand, I get it, why that was the way it was. You see, because even they were of the opinion that Buddhism was all about letting go. So they must have thought to themselves, this child has gone through so much to acquire all the things that he has by the age of what, 20, 25, 28, around that time. I worked my socks off, worked into the wee light of the morning, and done everything in my power, in my capability to earn and acquire wealth and other prosperity around me. So then, for my parents, for my siblings and my loved ones to watch me follow a path that they thought would end up in me having to let go of everything, you could imagine they were not very impressed. And all because they cared about me. They truly did. They cared so much about me that they didn't want me to do anything that I would not be happy with. So that was how things started off. And again, when you start to listen to talks given by a Buddhist monk, and if your family or friends get to know about it, then it's quite possible that they may also feel the same way. So the first thing you need to do is to empathize with that. They're only feeling that way and they're only reacting the way they do because they care about you. And for that, most of all, you should be grateful. Because rightly or wrongly, for the right or wrong reasons, the fact that they care about you is a big deal in itself, isn't it? And we must return that care. So when I realized that actually that Buddhism is not about letting go, I slowly started to share these concepts, these ideas with them for only one reason, and that is for them to understand what I was up to and therefore be reassured that I'm doing what I'm doing for the right reasons. So when I finally decided to take a bold step in what seemed to me the right direction, one that it was only a matter of time that it was going to happen. By that time, my family was prepared and willing to help me on that journey, and they did it quite happily. So I expect that this day may come for some of you in future. It may be a long time in the making right now, but it may come someday for you in your lives. And if it does, it does. If it doesn't, it doesn't. That's not the problem. But I want you all to be empathetic towards your friends and your family, your loved ones. In the event that they question what you're doing, in the event that they get a little bit annoyed or frustrated or maybe irritated that you have taken up a new interest and one that leads to you letting go of everything, then please be understanding of them. And the best way to remedy that situation is to share with them what you have learned as you make progress. Because then they begin to realize that actually Buddhism is nothing about letting go, and it's all about realization. So since then, on these talks, I have been sharing with you what I have understood so that you may understand and that you may realize for yourself. I can only explain things to you as best I can so you understand them, but the realization has to happen in each and every one of you. And that is a wholly personal affair. I can't realize on your behalf, surely. Just as much as you can't do that on my behalf. But I can certainly explain things to you as best I can until you understand it, until the penny drops. Now, I appreciate that given the medium through which we are connected, that is a video where you are unable to respond to me and I'm unable to see how much and to what depth you have understood what I have shared with you, I continue to keep these ideas as simple as I possibly can. Because I want this to mean something for as many of you as possible. From the 7-year-old to the 70-year-old. From the poorest to the richest. Matters not. If you can hear me, if you can understand the simple language and the examples and the style in which I present these ideas to you, then I invite you to continue with us on this journey and hang in there, because all will come clear in a short while. So, on the 11th program today, let us see what we have in store. What did we talk about last week? Yes, we talked about black beauty, and we talked about, having used that as an example, how absence makes the heart grow fonder. We have talked about the roller coaster, remember that? And also how our conception that beauty, be that in sight, sound, smell, taste, or touch, is in the outside world material objects, is flawed. We are beginning to understand that actually this thing that we all experience as pleasure is not something that we can source from the outside world, but rather it is the product of a function that happens within our minds and internally, a wholly internal affair. Now, this is something I want you all to focus on and continue to reflect on as we go forward, because this will be the building blocks of your understanding. We need to get the fundamentals right, and if we lay a good foundation, then the rest will work itself together. So we need not worry about what's in store for us in the future, but rather we must ensure that we have the basics, the fundamentals laid down right and proper. So with that in mind, I would like to spend a little bit more time sharing with you and discussing and talking through a few more examples, because I really want this to become a realization for you. And sometimes it's not enough to just talk about one or two examples for something to become a realization. It's like learning math, for instance, right? You learn how to multiply and then you work through a couple of sums, and sometimes it's just not enough. Sometimes repetition. As you work on a few more problems, you begin to realize every single time I try this out, I get the same answer. So something's got to be right here. This has to be what I've been looking for. So we keep on trying all sorts of examples, and I hope that with each and every example that we take from the life lab, which is exactly where we ought to be trying these things out, I really hope that it's being proven to you time and time again that the concepts that we have discussed hold water. So I'd like to share with you another story. Have a think about this one and see how you feel about it. Okay? I want you to imagine a situation, and for those of you who are parents, this will be much easier than for others. But even if you are not, I'm sure if you just let your imagination run wild, you won't have any problems. Let's take a mother, for instance. A mother who has two children, and let's say they're both sons, and I'll even go as far as saying, let's imagine they're identical twins. Okay, so from the outside, you can't tell the difference. They're identical twins, and she dotes on both of them equally, as any mother would. So she loves them dearly, and they're a bundle of joy. Now, despite all the similarity between these two children, there is but one difference. It so happens to be that Tom, who's the younger of the two, well, they're identical twins, but let's say Tom's younger by a few minutes. That's quite possible. Usually, even in identical twins, you have an elder brother and a younger brother, right? So let's say Tom, who's the younger, and Jack, who's the elder. Tom and Jack, they're both in the same class at school, okay? But Jack is more academic than Tom. So Jack, who's the elder son, he's more academic than the younger son, Tom. Tom is more a sporty kind of guy. So he likes his sport, but he's not all that into his studies. So he doesn't perform well in class. In fact, sometimes his teachers get concerned about his performance in class, and every time the mother has to go for parent-teacher meetings, usually she has to spend more time with Tom's teachers than she does with Jack's. Why? Because that's usually where she gets most of her complaints from Tom's teachers. Why? Because Tom is not all that academic. Jack, on the other hand, is quite the academic one. He's very much into his studies and he's performing quite well in class. Now, in the last term exams, Jack scored highly, as usual, and he came out first in class, as he normally does. So he's a regular top performing student in class, and he's always in the first, second, or third rank. Now, I know this might sound odd and weird to some people in some cultures where in the education system that you are familiar with, you don't have a ranking in class, but in some cultures they do have that. So it's quite common. And they have a rank. So based on how many points you have, or how many marks you've managed to get in your exams, you are graded, and you are either the first, second, or third in class, and so on. Okay. So, but I know in some education systems they do not follow that method for whatever reason. So Jack's come out first in class, right? And it's quite a regular thing. He's always either first, second, or third. Hardly has he ever been any less than that in rank in class. And so he comes home and he tells his mother, "Mother, guess what? Yes, son. We got our exam results today. Yes, son. Guess what? What? I came out first." And mother says, "Well done, my son. Well done." So, of course, she's quite happy because her son has come out first in class. But the thing is this. He's a regular. He always comes out first or second. At worst, he's third in class. So you can imagine his mother's response is in line with that. So his mother is not all that surprised, as you would imagine, because it is what she expects. She knows that her son would normally come out first or second or third in class. So top rank in class. So therefore, she's not overly impressed by that. She's happy nonetheless. And her response, her reaction is in keeping with what she expected. So that's Jack. So Tom comes running now. Now Tom, remember, is not the academic one. He's a sporty chap, right? So Tom comes running and says, "Mother, yes, my son. I've got my grade." "Yes. Guess what?" "What?" "I'm third in class." And mother goes, "What? Oh my God, is that true, darling? You're third in class? Oh, that's fantastic. Really? We must celebrate. Let's go tell your daddy." She's over the moon, having heard what Tom had managed to achieve. Now, you might wonder, why this difference in response? Is that because mother loves Tom more than she does Jack? Is that why she gave a more loving and more endearing response to the younger son than she did the elder son? Is that why? Well, if we dig a little deeper, we begin to realize why this difference in reaction. Did you know? Well, of course you didn't, because I just made this up. That Tom